to do the first of a series of reviews. I mean, I'll be posting up reviews all the time, but I wanted to explain a few things before I started. Um, I don't want to do like typical reviews. I mean, I'll be doing all kinds of reviews, but for my first one, I wanted to focus on like a movie that movies that people usually don't like, but I like. Or movies that weren't the greatest thing, but like use the review to point out good things about them. Like a lot of people hate Jason Goes to Hell. That happens to be one of my favorite Jason movies. I'm going to do a review on that later. But for the first one, I wanted to review Texas Chainsaw, or Texas Chainsaw 3D, if some of you were lucky enough to go see it in 3D. Um, let's see, where do I start? I want to start with why the main reason why I like that movie is because it's different. It's not your typical Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. They, basically all the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, with the exception of Tobe Hooper's Part 2 from the 80s, they all start off with a group of teenagers, you know, stranded, out in Texas, run out of gas, whatever. I mean, you've seen the movies, you know the story. They basically all have the same plot. Um, I like this one because they kind of did like a Hatfields and McCoys type thing with it. They didn't just do your people running out of gas. I thought it was a cool concept, and you know they tried to do something different with this Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, and they really they tried to separate it from all the other ones. I really liked the remake, the prequel they did to the remake. I like all the sequels, some of them better than others. I'm a big fan of Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, which everybody hates. That was the first Leatherface movie I ever saw. But that's for another time. Back to Texas Chainsaw, or Texas Chainsaw 3D, whatever you want to call it. Like I said, they tried to do something different with it. They weren't going to do any more in the universe. The Hewitt universe, as I call it. The 2003 and 2005 films, Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Beginning. So they were going to reboot the franchise with this, which I think they did successfully, because as you know, we have a prequel to this one coming out here soon, titled Leatherface, which I'm pretty excited about that. I hope it's good. But they try to do something different with this. Like, I really like that they made it a direct sequel to the original film. None of the other ones, with the exception of Tobe Hooper's sequel in the '80s, directly link themselves to the first film. We just always get a cannibal family in some way, shape, or form, and they've got Leatherface. And we never, they never really tied it all together. And he's just always with the new family, and whatever. But they directly link this one to the original. And they even started it off with footage from the original, and I'm a big fan of, like, clip montages and stuff, like in the early Friday 13th films and stuff. I love that. So this movie's already got two good things going for it in my book. They try to do something different than all the rest of them, with the Hatfield McCoy thing, and making it more of like a revenge mystery movie. And and it's directly linked to the original. So I really like that. More good things about it. Leatherface was great in it. The guy who played Leatherface, Dan Yeager, he was pretty good. And if you really pay attention to the film, and you like watch his movements, you can tell that he really like studied Gunnar Hansen's work in the original. I was just watching it last night, and the scene in the van, when the van's tipped over, and Leatherface is running at them. When you see him coming through the back window, and the way he's like holding the chainsaw and trotting, And I mean, it looks just like Gunnar Hansen from the long chase sequence in the original. So that was something I noticed last night, and I thought it was pretty cool. And I like that he walked around with a limp. Because Leatherface cut his leg in the original, and they went to certain lengths to try and really link this Leatherface with the original. And I think they did a pretty good job of making this seem like the same person, but years later. The movie had some cool sequences in it. The carnival sequence was really cool. Thing I found disappointing with that was that they didn't do much with it. I wanted to see a big long set piece and see Leatherface killing people, and they could have done a lot more with it, which they had planned to do more with it, but they just didn't have it in the budget to do more with it than what they did. It was a little disappointing, but it was a cool idea, and it had some cool visuals. And like I said, I really like them linking it to the original with the family versus family. The Sawyer family versus the hell, I can't remember the name of the sheriff slash mayor, whatever. But they set up a Hatfield McCoy situation, and I thought it was interesting that they took Leatherface and made him into like an anti-hero in the film, because Leatherface is one of those characters that's he's a sympathetic character, kind of like Frankenstein's monster, or any one of those characters that you could think of. And he's sympathetic in the way that obviously he's simple, or mentally challenged. He's not quite all there, and it seems like he just kind of follows what he's told to do and what his family does, and what his family does is kill and eat people. So Leatherface, I was reading the other night. I was reading the 1995 Topps Comics put out a Jason versus Leatherface comic, which was interesting, but it wasn't very good. But they were kind of like, Leatherface was getting bullied and beat up on by the hitchhiker, and Jason was feeling sorry for him, because he kind of related to Leatherface because they were both different, and they kind of compared Leatherface and his family dynamic like a gang, and your gang is your family, and you protect your gang, and whether it's right or wrong, Leatherface doesn't really look at that. He just looks at it as like that's what he knows to do. So I don't look at Leatherface as an evil character, and I do look at him as a very sympathetic character. And I thought it was interesting that they kind of went the anti-hero route with him, again, doing something different than all the other films. There's a lot of great little nuggets in there. There's some cool kills in it, some cool visuals. Leatherface looked cool. I like the actor portraying Leatherface. The beginning sequence after the montage from the original, setting everything up, they start the very next morning, and they went through meticulously rebuilt that house. They decorated it exactly the way that it was in the original, and there's all kinds of cool cameos in there. They got Gunnar Hansen, the original Leatherface, is in that scene. Jim Siedow passed away before they could make this movie, so they had Chop Top from Part 2. Bill Moseley playing the character of the cook. They even brought back John Dugan to play Grandpa, and you can tell they probably shot a lot more for that opening sequence, but they didn't use it because they came back and had him put on the prosthetic grandpa makeup and everything, but you only see just a couple shots of him. He doesn't move, he doesn't do anything. It was kind of a wasted opportunity. And there's also a scene showing Leatherface. It is a deleted scene showing him in the back room, and you see the trucker from the end of Part 1 hanging up on the hooks, and they said they didn't include that because they thought it'd be confusing, but yet they included the truck on the side of the road when the sheriff was speeding up to the house. So I don't know. I don't think it would have been confusing, at least not for the fans. And as long as the fans get it, you know how they are in Hollywood. They feel like they got to cater to everyone. So whatever. But they had cameos from basically all the original cast. Marilyn Burns played the grandmother who gives the mansion away to the heroine of the film. Where Leatherface is locked in the basement and everything. And um, I just the movie's got a lot of great cameos. And it's also got a really interesting sense of family to it too. I mean, all the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films do in a strange way. Well, I guess it's not that strange since they're about a family, but the theme of sticking by your family, and your family is what really counts, is really heavy in that film, and they really push that idea to the forefront, and I thought that was really cool. Um, you know, it's such a cool film just because it's so different. They I respect the hell out of the producers and the director and the writer and everybody involved, just because they tried so hard to do something so different and such a bold idea. They could have done just your typical Texas Chainsaw Massacre film, and people still would have went to see it, but they tried to do something different, something extra, and I got to give props to that. And so that's all the good things about it, or most of the good things anyway that I can think of off the top of my head. Um, Now let's get into some of the bad stuff. Um, the first thing that comes to mind is like the I guess you could call it a plot hole about the timeline of the film. Obviously, the original took place in '74, and this is during modern times. People were running around with camera phones, and I mean, they wanted to make a contemporary Texas Chainsaw Massacre film where a lot of the other ones were period pieces. And I was watching the producer commentary on the DVD last night, and I mean, he didn't try to skirt the issue at all. He said, "Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, but we just tried to kind of hide any dates, like the dates on the gravestones." I've heard a lot of people online talk, when Heather is looking at the gravestone, and the death date is covered up, and you know obviously she's not going to be in her early 20s if she was born in 1974. I can forgive that. It's not that big of a problem for me. Like, and the fact that the filmmakers acknowledged it, so yeah, well, yeah, it doesn't make sense, but who gives a shit? So, whatever. And they also said, I thought it was funny though, the producer in the commentary, he was talking about, we kind of tried to skirt the issue of the date, and we just hope that nobody would care or notice. But I mean, if it's a direct sequel to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the very beginning of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre starts off, with them telling you it's 1974. But suspension of disbelief, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. Um, some other problems I had with the film were, a big problem for me was the tone of the film. Um, all the other Texas Chainsaw Massacres were hard R's, and you knew you were watching a rated R movie when you saw it. Um, this movie didn't. It seemed like the filmmakers didn't know whether they were trying to make a PG-13 film or a rated R film, and I feel like they were really trying to walk that line, because I mean, it was still rated R, and obviously filmmakers these days are trying to make PG-13 movies to get more butts in the seats, but it seems like they really held back with this one. And I'm not talking just I mean, with the gore and everything. I mean, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre barely has any gore in it whatsoever. It's practically bloodless. If you go back and watch it, there's not a whole lot of the red stuff. Um, this movie had some gory stuff in it, but um, the gore is not really where it seemed like they were. I mean, they they held back in some spots, I guess. But it just the tone of the film, like the some of the writing and just some of the feel of it, felt like I was watching a PG-13 film in one scene, and then the next scene I was watching a rated R movie. It was kind of off tonally. Um, but then it's not that big of an issue. Another issue though is some of the characters weren't that original. I guess. I mean, Heather's best friend, the slutty girl, trying to hook up with, I guess she had something with Heather's boyfriend in the past or whatever. I feel like that whole, that whole kind of a plot line, that shit's been done before, and there's always the slutty girl who's trying to, stab her friend in the back and fuck her boyfriend and all that, and I just didn't feel like the film needed that subplot in it, and not to mention it didn't even really go anywhere. I mean, they set it up, and then they went out in the barn and fooled around, and Leatherface started chasing Heather, and then she busts through the barn doors in the van, and then it's just it never gets mentioned again. It didn't it didn't add anything to the film, and I'm not a big fan of any kind of a plot line that doesn't either get resolved or add something to the larger narrative. So I just thought that was kind of cliche, and it's been done, and it didn't need to be done. And another sequence that kind of got on my nerves, and this is just because I'm kind of like, I don't know, anti-technology, I guess. I think people spend too much time on their phones. I'm tired of seeing movies where people are constantly on their phones, and now they're working phones into plots of movies and shit. And I'm just, I'm not a fan of it. The sequence where the cop has his camera phone and he's walking through the basement of the house. It was a cool suspenseful sequence. But to me, it just felt like they're like, hey, check out phone technology. Look what we can do with phones nowadays. I'm tired of movies looking like phone commercials. I could have done without that. Some of the writing was a little cringeworthy. Like the line towards the end when she throws Leatherface the chainsaw and she says, "Do your thing," cuz I mean, I'm almost even I feel embarrassed watching that. I could only imagine how embarrassed Alexandra Daddario must have felt saying that line on set, or reading it in the script. Like, seriously, my character says that. I'm not a big fan of one-liners and people spouting off these one-liners, at the end of the movie. There's so, and I might do a video about that, movies that were going great until somebody said an awful one-liner. Like Friday 13th, 2009, she's getting ready to kill Jason, say hello to your mommy for me in hell. Or, Freddy versus Jason, where, Monica Kena's character is getting ready to, cut off Freddy's head with Jason's machete. Welcome to my world, bitch. And I mean, I understand he said that to her earlier, but I'm just not a big fan of the whole one-liner thing. There's been a lot of great one-liners in horror films, classics over the years, but leave them for those movies, because they seem to know how to do it, and they don't know what they're doing anymore. So please leave the one-liners out. That was just such a cringe-worthy moment. If that movie didn't have, enough wrong with it as it is, they had to go and throw that shit in there. And I don't know. It's one of those things. If you're sitting around with some friends and passing a ball around, everybody takes a shot when that line gets spouted out. But a lot. So some of the characters weren't very likable. Obviously, her friend wasn't likable because she was, trying to fuck her boyfriend. None of the characters were really that. I mean, as far as the teenagers go, they weren't really that interesting, and they weren't very smart either. Like, who the fuck picks up a hitchhiker that person you've never met, and you take them to this mansion that you just inherited? And you're all gonna run off to town and go on a food run and leave this jackass back at the mansion, with all your shit, some dude you've never met. and of course he robs them blind before he gets killed by Leatherface. But I felt like some of the characters weren't very smart, and you know, even Heather, when she first gets chased by Leatherface. I mean, I know they did it to set up the cool shot, the 3D shot of the blade coming through the coffin, but you know, seriously, you're getting chased by a dude with a chainsaw and a skin mask on, and you're gonna go hide in a coffin in a grave? I don't fucking think so. But I don't know. For sum it all up, for me, there's not enough bad points in the movie for me to absolutely hate it. It's not the best Texas Chainsaw Massacre film out there. My least favorite of the series is part three. And not just because it was a butchered mess. I mean, it wasn't my favorite Texas Chainsaw Massacre film. Um, but I've read online and seen a lot of reviews on YouTube and things, and people just seem to absolutely hate this movie. And that's why I wanted to do this review, is point out some of the things about it that I thought were cool and made it different. I mean, it's not your typical Texas Chainsaw Massacre film, and that's probably why it left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. But that's why I like it. It's different. It's unique. They were bold, and they had the balls to try to do something different. And to have the balls to do something like that with a reboot. I mean, they could have done that with any one of the sequels or anything, but people usually try to play it pretty safe when they're rebooting something, and they just went balls to the walls. They said, let's go for it. And it's got its problems, but I think the film overall is pretty entertaining, and I enjoy watching it. So if I had to rate it, 1 through 5, I'd give it a 3. I'd give it a hard 3. I think it's worth checking out, and especially if you're tired of seeing the same old shit. Go check out Texas Chainsaw 2013. I thought it was a pretty decent movie, and that's the first of my reviews. I'm going to be doing a lot of different reviews, and there's going to be a lot of different themes to the reviews. Like I said, another underappreciated movie that I really enjoy is Jason Goes to Hell. I'm going to be reviewing some movies that I think deserve to be shown for the reasons that make them interesting. Because films that people focus on all the bad things, and I want to use some reviews to point out the good things about movies like Texas Chainsaw and Jason Goes to Hell, and other movies like that horror fans seem to really dislike. I want to do some reviews of some movies that I just think are just awesome. And also, I want to do some movies to point out why some movies are just terrible, like the remake of Carrie. I have ranted and ranted and ranted about that movie, and there's not enough words in the dictionary to describe my dislike for that film. I'm going to be doing a review for that too. So anyway, I thought Texas Chainsaw would be a good jumping off point for my first review, and there's more to come in the future. So keep it scary, guys.